Welcome to the Leaderonomics show, and today we have Fredrik Haren, who's with us, from Sweden. You're living in Singapore now, right, Fredrik? And he's a prominent authority, I guess, on creativity and innovation. So Fredrik, welcome to Malaysia, and tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into this whole space of creativity.
Actually, I've been doing it for 10 years now.
Okay.
Before that, I wrote books on the internet.
Okay.
But since 2000, I've been writing and speaking on creativity. I've written a total of 7 books,
okay,
and I've done speeches all over the world.
This whole space of creativity, right? There's what, 20,000 books on creativity, right?
Yeah.
Why another book on creativity?
There are 2 reasons. First, I have read literally hundreds of books on creativity, but I didn't find one that inspired me. So I wanted a creativity book should inspire you to want to be creative. Okay. So I guess I wrote the book I wanted. Mm-hmm. And the second reason is I didn't think that the creativity books on the market, I didn't find them creative enough. Okay. So if you look at my idea book, you can see it's a book, but it's also a notebook. Okay. So it's a book about ideas, but it's also a book for ideas. Okay.
And Fredrik, your latest book is The Developing World, right? Correct. What's this book about?
I moved from Sweden to China 4 years ago. Okay. And I moved because I was going to, as a creativity author, and Hu Jintao held a speech to China, to the nation, where he said China is going to become an innovative country. Mm-hmm. And as a Swede, ignorant Swede who wrote on business creativity, I said, oh, God, they need help. Yeah. So I moved to China to help them become creative. Okay. But then when I lived there, I said, oh, maybe I was not there to teach, maybe I was there to learn. So for the last 4 years, I've been traveling to more than 18 developing countries. I've interviewed 200 people. I went to Malaysia, I went to South Korea, South Africa, Turkey, India, China. And I interviewed people in developing countries that somehow are working with creativity. Okay. And I tried to see what's happening in the world, and why is it an advantage to be living in a developing country compared to a developed country? And I think that actually the cover is very symbolic, because there's a classic photo of how taken from the space where you see all the developed world is all lit up, right, and all the developing countries are all dark. So we did the opposite. So in this one, okay, all the developing countries are lit up and all the developed worlds are...
And why is that? I mean, why do you think there's an advantage to being in the developing country?
Basically because I think that the developed world did a huge mistake by defining some countries as developed and some as developing. Because if you define yourself as being developed, you are telling yourself that you are done. That's what it means. Right. My country is developed, my country is done. I have reached the pinnacle, nothing can be improved, we are more or less done. Okay. But let me just clarify, I'm not saying that the developed world stopped innovating, but if you say that you think that you're done, you slow down. Yeah. And when you slow down, there is less momentum, there's less creativity, there's less curiosity. Yep. While in the developing countries, there's so much energy, there's so much curiosity, there's so much... Someone said, I interviewed, said, they are like sponges, because you just absorb all this knowledge, all these trends, you want to know, you want to learn. Now ask yourself, who has the potential to be the most creative? Someone who's curious as a sponge and just sucking it up, or someone who says, oh, I know everything, there's nothing for me to learn? Obviously, people in developing countries. Yeah. So I turned these 2 words around, and my goal is that the word developing country should become a positive word. I want people to go around with t-shirts to say, I come from a developing country, I am a developing person. Yeah. And it should be a bad word to say, I am a developed person. You say you're developed, you say you're done.
So one advantage, I guess, is the fact that in the developing world, there's this mindset that you want to continue to learn and innovate. But are there other advantages to being in the developing world?
One of the classic advantages, in the book I have identified 8. Okay? 8 different advantages. Now I also know that people in developing countries have disadvantages, but you talk about them all the time. And you should never talk about you should identify your disadvantages, but you should also identify your advantages, and you should use those. So one is the fact that there's more energy here. Another advantage is the fact that you have a knowledge advantage. You know about your culture, but you also know about my culture, right? But people in Sweden, we don't know about your culture. True. So you have, like I symbolize, you have 2 eyes, yep, I have 1 eye. Now who has the potential to see more? Obviously the person with 2 eyes.
Right. So and by seeing more, you can link things together and create more and be more.
You can take the best of something that you see here and the best something from us, and you combine that into something new. But if I don't know anything about you, how can I take that? Exactly. Yeah, so we are limited. Our scope of vision is more limited, which makes us more limited in what we can imagine. Yep. Yeah. Another advantage is that people in developing countries have bigger dreams and visions of what their life and their country and their future should be. And this is very important. There's 2 reasons. First, because I think I quote someone in the book, I think it was Michelangelo. He said, our biggest fear should not, something like this. Our biggest fear should not be that we set our goals too high and don't reach them. It should be that we set our goals too low and we reach it. Because when we set our goals 50 years ago in the developed world, saying this is what we want to achieve, and then we achieved it. But then what? So we are at a loss right now. We don't know where we're going. And the second thing is that we don't have dreams because we see now what's happening in developing countries, and a lot of people get scared and say, oh, look, now China is coming. Oh, India is coming. Oh, Indonesia is coming. Malaysia is coming. And we get scared, which is a total wrong reaction. We should not be scared because other people are also joining. We should say, oh, bigger party. So, and it's so important because innovation comes from dreaming. If you can't dream it, you can't make it. If you can't imagine it, you can't create it. So creativity is very well linked to being able to dream something that isn't. And if you don't have dreams, there will be, per definition, less creativity. Another advantage is leapfrogging. The fact that, like, for example, if you have a landline, or if you have a credit card, to move to paying with your mobile phone, is, why should I pay with my mobile phone? I already have a credit card. And every shop has a credit card reader. But if you don't have a credit card and the shops don't have a mobile phone, they can choose to implement a mobile phone reader, and suddenly you start paying with mobile phones. Right? If you don't have a landline, it's very easy to just buy a mobile phone. But if you have a landline, should I also use a mobile phone? If you have a big TV, you say, should I throw away my old TV and buy a flat screen instead? If you don't have a TV, you buy a flat screen TV. And that is what's happening in developing countries right now. You leapfrog. But we are stuck in our old infrastructure, which means we have to take a decision. Should we get rid of the old and buy the new? Of course, it's easier. It's like you have a sofa. If you have an old sofa, should I throw it out? If you don't have a sofa, you just buy a sofa.
And you buy the best.
And you buy the newest sofa. Yeah, exactly, the latest sofa. If you're a printer, you have an old printer, or you don't have a printer, you buy its newest. So that means suddenly you have access to more modern technology than I do in the developed world.
So with all these advantages, right? Even though there are, I guess some are advantages that we don't even see in the developing world. What do we do of this? I mean, what can the developing world, how can they get? I guess first is a mindset change. But how do we embrace these advantages and take advantage of it?
The first thing you need to do is get aware of it. Because if you have an advantage and you don't know about it, it's like if you have a tool and you don't know you have the tool, you don't have the tool.
Exactly.
So first of all, you have first awareness.
And how do we create this awareness?
Well, I'm traveling around the world spreading it.
You're the evangelist.
I'm the evangelist for the developing world. Yes. I switch sides. But I also go to the developed world and I tell them, wake up,
And will they wake up?
It depends. They will wake up, but they will wake up slower than they should have. They should have woken up a long time ago. And the good thing is, and the bad thing is, they think they have woken up. And you think that we know about, but we don't, right? I like to say that you are underestimating our ignorance. You think that we know about you, but we don't know anything. And we think we know about you, and we don't know anything. And that's the worst kind of ignorance, when you think that you can do something that you cannot do. If you think you have knowledge but you don't have it, it's worse than not thinking. It's terrible. You're overestimating yourself. You're cocky, and cockiness is never. Too much cockiness is never a good thing.
So the first step is the awareness. What's the next few steps?
The next few steps is for a developing country. Okay, so first you are aware, and then when you're aware, you have to understand it won't happen automatically. You can't make awareness turn into so that you suddenly become cocky, right? So you need to understand that you have to get rid of all the disadvantages that you still have, and you have to work with them harder than ever. And so just because you have strengths doesn't mean you don't have to work on your weaknesses, right? So that's another one. And then I think you should put your goals, you should raise your goals. You should not say we should reach this level, the same world, the developed world level. You should put your goals higher, because if you achieve what we have been achieving, the world is going to collapse. So you need to put your goals higher. You need to take charge. You need to lead. You need to say, we are going to have higher environmental goals than we have put, for example. We need to be more sustainable than the developed world is. You need to lead, learn, teach us.
It's interesting because I can parallel this to an individual Because if an individual says I'm a developed person
Yeah.
or a developed leader,
Yeah.
I stop building my leadership skills. And
Yeah.
if I'm a developing leader, I continue to work on my leadership.
Or a group. If we are a group of things that we know everything there is to know, we stop. Look at Nokia. Nokia is a great example of a company that used to be a developing company. They came from boots and tires and they went into mobile phones. Crazy. They just changed the mobile phone industry. They innovated and they grew like crazy. But look at Nokia now. Suddenly, 40% market share, taking it for granted, trying to protect what they have, and at a loss of innovation.
It's interesting, the Nokia example, because Apple did exactly what Nokia did
Yes.
20 years ago, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because they were not in the mobile phone business at all.
And
they came in.
And Apple is redefining what Apple is all the time.
Yes.
A computer company, a mobile phone company, a content company, and they're redefining themselves.
Right.
Doesn't mean Apple always will be.
Yeah,
Sony was just like that.
Yes.
Sony innovated. Sony should have done the iPod, but they didn't.
So it's just interesting when a company decides that I've developed or I'm at my pinnacle,
Yeah.
that's really the starting point of the big four, right?
Yeah, and if you look at companies, usually they have to go really deep into trouble until they realize that. I did a speech last week at a steel company in Austria. It used to be a state-owned company. They always lost money, and they lost, and the government put in more money. And then the government suddenly said, this is the last time you get money from us, and now we're privatizing you, so you won't get any more money. So if you don't survive now, you are bankrupt. And suddenly the whole company went, ding, and they said, oh, maybe we need to do something. Right. And they have been able to transform themselves from a developed steel company to one of the most innovative steel companies in the world right now. They're not that big, but they're world leaders on their steel. And I talked to the CEO, and I said, how could you do that? Go from an old government, boring, money-losing, developed company, how could you transform yourself? He says, because we almost went bankrupt. That's kind of a shock you have to do.
That forces you out.
And as a person, you also know when you have a big crisis and you survive it, that's when you grow. So if you looked at countries, then it means that the developed world probably needs to go much deeper into problems before we can start re-emerging as something else. Hopefully we will be able to do it quicker, but I'm not so sure, because it's so easy to just think that you can just, we're just going to